I will give a brief introduction of what the panel is all about. So this session will hopefully talk about the panelists' experiences, not only as writers, but as Filipino writers. In the onslaught of globalization characterized by massive mobility of people, advanced technology, the polarizing yet confusing effect of new media, and the simultaneous participation of migrants in several nation-states, there is a greater need for the Filipino writers to redefine and assert his or her identity. The borderless society makes the concept of nation quite slippery and fluid, and the challenge of a Filipino writer is to capture the nuances and in-between of these dynamics. A nation imagined, a nation that goes beyond geographical borders and territories. What is home? Where is home? What is a country for these writers? And where is their country? Writing in this sense is more than a craft, more than a skill. It becomes a calling. It is a courage in an ambivalent sense. We start with Vim, who is instrumental in bringing me here, actually. He's the designated lead of the Philippine delegation, but he's a professor at the University of the Philippines and director of the Philippine High School for the Arts. And he's also very active in creative. He has various poetry collections and anthologies, an epic, a novel, and does research and publication in poetry. He's also a performance actor and director. So our first speaker is Victor Emmanuel Carmelo Nadera Jr.
Thank you. Thank you po. Magandang umaga. An ism is national when a state or a nation identifies with the people. It is a question of desire, especially if it is according to the ethnographic principle that each nationality should dream of a state. Before, there was no concept of where a person lived, or an idea of one's political organization like city, fiefdom, dynasty, or sect. The ideal during the first 15th century of the Christian era was the universal world state as set by the Holy Roman Empire in the so-called Respublica Christiana or Christian Republic or community. Civilization indeed was determined by religion, language included. So if there is a Christian, the language is either Latin or Greek. On the other hand, if a Muslim, it is either Arabic or Persian. Renaissance and Classicism periods saw Greek and Romance, even French civilization, become the universal norm for educated people of all nationalities. It was the practice until the end of the 18th century, when the mother tongue was hailed. That was how powerful language was, especially if it was literary. Poets, like scholars, began talking about cultural nationalism in dealing with national past as the main ingredient for the foundation for political claims for nation statehood. Centralized states, secularized life and education, and rising middle classes contributed a lot to the development of such theories as the sovereignty of the people, who eventually replaced the king as the center of the nation. Unity became a desired goal. In Western Europe and North America, nationalism was believed to go hand in hand with cosmopolitanism as well as common love of mankind. Historians more often than not equated nationalism in Asia or Africa with Kemal Atatürk of Turkey, Saad Pasna Sagul of Egypt, Ibn Saud of Arabian Peninsula, Mahatma Gandhi of India, or Sun Yat-sen of China. However, even before World War I, there was Jose Rizal of the Philippines. And he was not alone in dealing with nationalism. Philippine history had a period of bayan. It began in 1588 during the estate of the last king of Manila, considered by the Spaniard as the bravest, Raja Suliman or Raja Mura, or Young King, who died fighting Spanish forces in 1571 in Bangkusay, Tondo. Under it, pueblos or towns and ciudades or cities were created from pamayanans or communities as Manila became the center of commerce, known then as the Walled City or Intramuros. During the time, the form of government turned colonial, like the different ethnic states, especially after the Spaniards won the Battle of Ternate in 1602. They started building prestigious, namely Dapitan and Butuan, both in the southernmost part of the country, where New Manila was also built in Jolo. In 1635, Zamboanga was created as part of the pacification strategy of Spain in Mindanao, and this resulted to violent reactions from the inhabitants, the Muslims, like Kachil Kudarat, who waged the first holy war or jihad in 1665. However, spreading like wildfire was the Spanish reduction, or the system wherein people were grouped together in one place where the focal points were the municipal hall and the church. Such costs had effects on everlasting on Philippine culture. Number one, friars acted as the articulators of who would explain the oral tradition. Number two, religion became formal since it was held inside the church. Number three, Jesus Christ and the saints replaced anitos and deities. Number four, confessions, although not fully understood by the natives, were practiced because of the blind obedience in the priest. Resistance erupted, which mostly by the Muslims eventually led to rebellions. As early as 1521, when Magellan landed in Mactan Island, he already knew that he was no welcome surprise. So Lapu-Lapu, the first Philippine hero, showed them the way. Then every fierce and freedom-loving body followed, just as Lacandula, 1575, the Pampangueños, 1585, Magad Salamat, 1587 to 1588, Magalat, 1586, the Igorots, 1601, Felipe Catabay and Gabriel Dayag, 1621, Tamblot, 1621, Bangkao, 1622, Ladia, 1622, Juan Ponce Sumuroy, 1649, Francisco Maniago, 1659, Andres Malong, 1666, Pedro Almasan, 1661, Tapar, 1663, Francisco Dagoy, 1744 to 1829, Juan Banal, 1745 to 1756, Diego Silang, 1762, Gabriela Silang, 1762, Juan de la Cruz Palares, 1762, the Ilocanos, 1807, and Apolinario de la Cruz, 1841. While most of the records of battle were in Luzon and Visayas, the Muslims in Mindanao had unheralded triumphs against the Spaniards in Sulu, Tawi-Tawi, Zamboanga, Lanao, Cotabato, Sultan Kudarat, and Maguindanao in the name of their Bangsa Moro. But before it happened, the British invaded Manila in 1762. After 2 years, when the Seven Wars in Europe ended in 1763, the Spaniards came back. It may be too late, too short, but it was enough for a lesson to be learned that Spain could, after all, be defeated. In addition, it was also during the time when situations like the commercialism of haciendas gave rise to ilustrado. Illumined, they become spark that would turn into conflagration, spread like news about how Mexicans won their freedom in 1812 through the help of a priest who happened to be a Creole. Criollos, or people of Spanish descent in the Philippines, took that cue and called themselves hijos del país, or sons of the country, who believed that they were supposed to be consulted about the Philippine affairs before they were better than the Peninsulares. They too subscribed to the belief that it was high time that Philippines should break away from Spain. Taking inspiration from Europe and Latin America, they wrote in 1821 a 20-page essay, El Niño Agraviado, that fought the rights of the natives who were abused by the Spaniards. Among them, two poets articulated their plight. Jose de Vergara's La Culpa Tení Señor, 1813, and Luis Rodriguez Varela's El Parnaso Filipino, 1814, succeeded in conceptualizing Filipino nation. From such viewpoint, it was composed of Peninsulares, Creoles, Mestizos, and Indios. Economic boom in the Philippines facilitated the inflow of liberalism from the 19th century from France, and other European countries that also gave way to the so-called intellectual elitism. Such mind would be felt by the Tagalog heart too, that was responsible for the nationalist literature, or rather, literary nationalism of the entire Philippines. That synergy between the Filipino diwa and damdamin that could mean the end of colonialism. For the colonizers, then as now, when the colonies became one, intellectually and emotionally, the captive body, even in chains, would turn themselves into a volcano, and the rest was the unrest. After such movements as Ilustrados, as Asociación Hispano-Filipino 1869, Juventud Escolar Liberal 1869, Filipinización 1872, Propaganda 1889, it was predictable more or less for a Rizal to form La Liga Filipina 1892 with fellow reformists in Graciano Lopez Haina, Mariano Ponce, and Marcelo del Pilar. One of their members, Andres Bonifacio, who consequently create Kataas-taasan, Kagalang-galangang Katipunan ng mga anak ng bayan, 1892, with other revolutionaries Teodoro Plata, Ladislao Diwa, Donato Arellano, Valentin and Diaz, and Emilio Jacinto. They were all poets. Another Katipunero, Emilio Aganado, a non-poet, would become the first president of the Philippine Republic and declare independence on 1898. Like Rizal, most of them are writers.
Okay, thank you very much, Sir Vim. So this talk was an attempt to trace the historical construction of Filipino nation. And there are two concepts, I think, that emerge, or the resulting state. You have Bangsa, Moro, which literally means the country or the nation of the Moors or the Moros of Mindanao, which until now is still a struggle in the Mindanao, in the island of Mindanao.
You know what? Our national hero, Jose Rizal, who is also a writer and very good at that, when the Spaniards could not find faults in his ideas, political ideas, he was accused of being ungrammatical. Such is the fate of a writer who is very political. He wanted to be Filipino. He doesn't want to be called an Indio, an Indian. An Indian refers to a lower class of people, the uncivilized kind, which an Ilustrado, the very informed Jose Rizal and his group, would not want to be so-called Indio. So when the verdict announcing his death the following day was released, there was the word that Jose Rizal, you a Chinese mestizo. Of course, he was a Chinese mestizo. Some trivia, the family name of his great-grandfather was Domingo Lamco. He is somehow related to the president, Rodrigo Duterte, but of a different kind and of a different temper. And and when he was accused of being a Chinese, he protested not violently. He edited the verdict containing his death sentence and said, "No, I am not a Chinese mestizo. I am an Indio." So proudly, let us celebrate together, you and me, both Indios. And thank you. Actually, what I'm trying to do is my misadventure in search of my literary world, a confession. So I do not intend to give a lecture on the Philippine history, but maybe a few words will suffice. Great people in the Philippines, Jose Rizal, Andres Bonifacio, are heroes, are being addressed to as God. These are this is a Sanskrit term, but from the class of poet entertainers, which we borrowed as God, meaning a great man. We're supposed to talk about heroism and writing, and may I confess that I know little of heroism, but much more on writing. So I hope you you allow me to talk on the latter. As a boy, I was born with a very big head and very small legs. So my parents and my relatives predicted that I won't live long. The earliest word I learned is dying. Is that boy still alive? So, because of my big head, they imagined that I will grow up. Big head are supposed to have big minds, big brains. But because as a boy I was a very precocious child, at the age of 5 I could not talk and I could not even run. Much more about heroism. I'm sure you don't want lame heroes. You want heroes to be doing their stand on martial arts. But I'm only an artist. So my father, I remember his first. I was 5 year old, and I'm supposed to be playing around with other children, but I could not. So my father decided that he would teach me how to run, and he did. And when we came back home, he called my mother. Our son finally learned how to run. My mother responded, "How dare you? You did? Oh my God!" And before she finished his sentence, I saw an interplay of light and shadow, which eventually ends up all shadow. The following day, I woke up newly bathed, half-rested, and still would not know how to run. I first learned how to paint than to speak. And my first attempt on writing was when I was already in high school. So I did a little poetry in English, and I thought I was doing fine. So when my teacher called my attention, young man, you're the one who wrote this poem. Yes, I did. I told my advisor rather arrogantly. Remember, I was only a freshman student. And she said, you write rather sophomoric. Oh, thank you. I thought that was a praise. And then when I realized that I really was sophomoric in my poetry, I burned all those poems later on, fearing that it got published.
I prepared an essay, but I think um, the application conspired with me not to use it anymore for this morning. I've been staring and observing the faces of the people here while listening to us, and I think the best route for accessibility is by addressing everyone as citizens of the world and as lovers of literature and art. So from that perspective, I'd like to use the perspective of a woman, since the names and the events that were mentioned were all male-centered. I guess I'm taking that route because one of the impulses for me becoming a writer was due to my being silenced as a young girl and later as a young woman. That act of being silenced is, I guess I'm thankful for it. If not for that gesture, I wouldn't see that my plight is not at all personal. And there are others, not exactly of my own gender, people from different classes, different races, have all felt have all been silenced for some reason or the other. Recently, I've been on a trip to Italy for an Erasmus Mundi grant. And I was supposed to go there as a translator. And I was shall we call it, so audacious that I thought I knew the language well enough that I could compete with other native Italian speakers in using that language. If you'll ask me if I still remember those lessons of Italian, I shall tell you honestly, I can't anymore. Perhaps because while I was in Genoa, I felt as an outsider. It was not really a pleasant experience, but looking back, I guess it was a God-given gift for me to shape my foundations, my preconceived notions of what a writer or what a human being should be. So, after immersing myself in several lessons of the Italian language, the are, ire, verbs that I thought that I could master well enough, I've been thrown in the company of strangers and other Asians and other Europeans that I have to take a checklist, note to self, don't laugh too much, don't forget the keys, try to walk a little faster, remember maps. And for me, I'm not good at math, I'm not good at navigation, I keep getting lost. I'm almost 50, and I keep getting lost in interactions. That's why even the counterflow in this country, the way the buses are run, the way the traffic is run, terrifies me. And that sort of traffic occurs in language, in sensibilities, in intelligences. There was one encounter that I do remember from that Genoa experience. It was meeting a migrant from Nigeria. He was a black guy. I was dependent on the stipend that I'm supposed to get from the Erasmus Mundi. And knowing the bureaucracy of money that is given out to scholars, it took quite a while. So even if I had a little cash with me, I wouldn't gamble on using the remaining dollars that I have, because I've always felt that if it weren't for my quick wits, who knows, I might be in Timbuktu if I don't do anything. So in short, I felt hungry, and I felt lonely, and I felt oppressed. One day, I was walking the streets of Via Lomellini. It's a small street. They have those winding, labyrinthine streets in Italy. And I saw this person. We were both staring at the breads that were sold in a small, there's a word that they use, paneteria, that they have. And I felt his breathing. Don't ask me how, but it's one of those strange sensitivities that I have among people. And I knew he was as hungry as I was. And I told him, would you like some of that? And I used up my remaining euros for a small shared meal of Coke and a slice of pizza. That meal involved him talking about his experience as a migrant from Nigeria. How he took the gamble of taking those, the ones in the news about unfit transports, lost at sea, and many are drowned in the process, and how he almost died during that process. And I asked him why he left his country, and he showed me a scar on his left arm. It was a ghastly scar that there's a narrative behind it of how he survived a theft in his own house. Now, you might think that the home is the most secure place, but in his case, as well as mine, that is not necessarily true. Sometimes the home is the most um, unsafe, traumatic place that you can be in. Anyway, so he told me his story. And I said, why don't you write that? And he said, he just smiled and said, maybe. And I brought that story with me home to Manila. And it's still in my head. And I remember that incident. While I'm here at this moment, in this space, talking to you in India about what are we supposed to imagine ourselves as writers. And I think just to sort of coordinate with the rest of the remarks, that is some form of heroism too. To survive in this world and to maintain poise, dignity, humor in this world, diba? That's a sort of heroism. That's the kind of heroism that not only Rizal, Emilio Jacinto, the rest of the male heroes that they mentioned.
Meron pa akong feeling.
There's one woman, the Lakambini of the Katipunan, Gregoria de Jesus, who only wrote 2 texts. One is a poem called Magmula Giliw nang Ikaw ay Pumanaw. This is an elegy to the slain Andres Bonifacio, who died a horrible death because he died in the hands of the same men, brothers, that he was supposed to lead in the Katipunan. So while Gregoria de Jesus was musing about how that empty space in the dulang or the table is what she's looking at, it's not only an individual grief that I'm reading, but also a collective one, because the Filipinos lost a father of the nation. Another text that Gregoria de Jesus wrote was a non-fiction essay that she briefly talked about her life, how she was initiated into the Katipunan, and she ended the essay with these unforgettable lines. Matakot sa kasaysayan, pagkat mahaba ang kanyang gunita. So, to translate, be very afraid of history. It has its own memory. So, as a writer, we treasure our memories because it's the only thing we have, and we're supposed to sing about it every time we write on paper. Thank you.